You send a message to someone you've known for 8 years. Hey, want to grab coffee next week? They reply almost instantly. Yeah, soon. That word, soon, feels harmless, neutral, polite. A week passes. You send another message. This time, the reply comes hours later. Sorry, crazy week. Nothing happened. No argument, no visible tension. And yet, you can feel it. Here's the paradox. We live in the most connected era in history. We can reach almost anyone instantly. And still, adult friendships now end without a single clear sentence. No goodbye, no explanation, no defined turning point, just thinning. This is soft ghosting. And the real question isn't whether friendships change. They always have. The real question is, why does the slow fade often feel heavier than a direct ending, even when no one was openly unkind? Because the answer isn't about oversensitivity. It's about how ambiguity interacts with identity, priority, and modern social signaling. Soft ghosting isn't dramatic silence. It's behavioral reduction. Replies get shorter, gaps get longer, plans become maybe, enthusiasm flattens, the tone stays polite. That's what makes it destabilizing. If someone openly rejects you, the story is clear. If someone blocks you, the boundary is visible. But soft ghosting exists in the space between connection and closure. It's not rupture, it's erosion. Micro example. Two friends used to send long voice notes. One starts responding with, haha, yeah, then just, yeah, then reacts with a thumbs up. They still follow each other. They still occasionally respond. But depth is replaced with minimal acknowledgement. Nothing officially ended, but functionally, something ended. Micro summary. Soft ghosting replaces explicit rejection with gradual reduction, and that subtlety makes it cognitively harder to close. Now look at the mechanism underneath. Soft ghosting usually serves 3 psychological purposes: avoid conflict, protect self-image, maintain control through ambiguity. Conflict avoidance is straightforward. Direct endings introduce friction. Saying, I don't feel the same connection anymore, requires emotional exposure. It requires tolerating someone else's reaction. Many adults are socially trained to minimize visible discomfort, especially in long-standing friendships where shared history raises stakes. Self-image preservation is quieter but powerful. It's easier to think, I'm overwhelmed, than to articulate, I don't want to invest here anymore. The internal story remains intact. I'm responsible. I'm busy. I'm not rejecting anyone. This keeps identity stable. Ambiguity, however, is the strategic piece. If you never explicitly say you're stepping back, the other person cannot anchor the shift to a sentence. There is nothing to debate, no defined break. The withdrawal remains technically reversible, even if practically it isn't. Micro example. A friend stops initiating. You ask directly, did something change? They reply warmly, no, not at all, just a lot going on lately. The reassurance reduces immediate tension, but behavior doesn't change. The gap continues. Micro summary. Soft ghosting minimizes immediate discomfort for one person while transferring long-term interpretation to the other. Pause here. If you've experienced this, which side felt heavier? Delivering clarity or trying to decode distance? Write that in the comments. I'm genuinely curious how people experience this asymmetry. Because this behavior reflects broader cultural shifts. Modern adulthood is structured around overload, more connections, more platforms, more optionality. Attention becomes scarce. Scarcity creates prioritization, and prioritization creates gradients of responsiveness. Responsiveness becomes visible status. Who gets immediate replies? Who gets thoughtful engagement? Who gets postponed repeatedly? In digital spaces, delay itself becomes information. And here's where it deepens. Soft ghosting doesn't just signal distance, it signals reprioritization. Not necessarily because someone did something wrong, but because social bandwidth is finite. In previous generations, friendships often faded due to logistics, distance, family obligations, physical separation. Now, fading happens while connection remains technically available. You can see someone active online. You can see them responding elsewhere. You can see them showing up, just not for you. That visibility intensifies interpretation. Silence becomes comparative. Not they disappeared, but they're present, just not here. That distinction is psychologically sharper. Micro summary. In a hyper-visible environment, reduced responsiveness feels like re-ranking, and re-ranking affects perceived relational value. There's another subtle dimension: language markers. Soft ghosting often includes predictable phrases: soon, Crazy week. Let's see. We should. These phrases maintain openness without commitment. They delay closure while preventing confrontation. Linguistically, they preserve optionality. Optionality is a modern value. It keeps exits clean. It avoids irreversible statements. But optionality also suspends resolution. When soon repeats without fulfillment, the word shifts meaning. It stops being a plan and becomes a placeholder. And placeholders extend liminal space, not fully connected, not fully ended. Humans struggle with liminal states. We prefer defined categories, close or distant, active or ended. The slow fade creates an in-between category that lacks ritual. There is no social script for it, no formal acknowledgement, no shared language, just pattern recognition over time. And that pattern reshapes identity, because identity is relational. Who were you in that friendship? Were you central, occasional, replaceable, transitional? When the ending is undefined, the role remains unresolved. The mind searches for causality. When did tone change? Was there a missed cue? Did priority shift suddenly or gradually? Ambiguity extends narrative processing. Explicit closure compresses discomfort into a moment. The slow fade spreads it over months. For the person fading out, the strategy feels efficient. No confrontation, no emotional spike, no visible rupture. For the person on the receiving end, the absence of clarity can generate prolonged cognitive friction, not because of drama, but because of incompletion. And here's the deeper insight. Soft ghosting is not primarily about indifference. It's a modern compromise between autonomy and moral self-consistency. We want control over our time. We want to curate our social environment. We want to avoid unnecessary friction. We also want to maintain the identity of being fair and kind. Ambiguity becomes the bridge that holds those values together. But ambiguity externalizes uncertainty. In a world of constant connection, silence is rarely neutral. It becomes an interpretive signal, even when the sender intends neutrality. The slow fade reveals something about contemporary adulthood. We are highly competent at managing bandwidth. We are less practiced at marking endings clearly. And when clarity becomes optional, interpretation becomes mandatory. There's also a time layer that makes soft ghosting heavier in long-term friendships. When a connection spans years, it carries accumulated context, shared memories, inside jokes, old versions of you. The longer the history, the stronger the assumption of durability. So when disengagement happens quietly, it doesn't feel like a simple scheduling issue. It feels like historical revision. Because if something that lasted 8 or 10 years can dissolve without a sentence, it forces a reevaluation of what stability means. Another subtle factor is asymmetry of awareness. Often, one person has already recalibrated internally long before behavior shifts outward. They've processed the distance. They've emotionally stepped back. By the time replies get shorter, the internal decision may already be complete. The other person, however, experiences the shift in real time. For them, the change begins at the moment of reduced engagement. That creates a lag, not just in communication, but in emotional processing. One person exits gradually in private, the other discovers the exit gradually in public. That timing difference intensifies the imbalance. And because no explicit marker signals the transition, the realization often arrives retrospectively. Not "we ended," but "we've already ended." That delayed recognition is part of what makes the slow fade feel disorienting. It turns a shared relationship into two separate timelines. That shift changes how secure connection feels, not because people care less, but because endings have become less explicit. Friendships have always evolved. What's new is the normalization of quiet disengagement without ritual. And once you see the pattern, shorter replies, longer pauses, polite vagueness, it becomes difficult to unsee how much modern connection is shaped not by what we declare, but by what we gradually stop investing. If this put language to something you've experienced, share your perspective below. And if you want more analytical breakdowns of modern social signals and identity shifts, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Because the real cultural shift isn't that friendships end, it's that we've learned to end them without saying so. And that tells us something important about how we balance comfort, control, and connection in modern life.